This is Antoinette. How may I help you?
What's up, everybody? Good evening to you. You know, I made up a little script. I was watching the Sean Ryan show. Not Sean Ryan, technically it's Tucker Carlson, but Sean Ryan was on there and everything is a lie. Not per me, per them. Was looking for barrels of sweet crude. Wound up buying a whiskey barrel from Jack Daniels, of all things. I came up with a script. I don't really like doing that because it seems disingenuous, you know, too crafted, too polished, too inauthentic, you know, not genuine. We've talked about that a lot. I've got a ring light, so maybe you can see me a little bit better. So for your viewing pleasure, better for you. I don't really dig it because, and now I see why JD DeLay probably wears his sunglasses. I don't really dig these ring lights, but I do want you guys to have something decent to look at. Look, man, I've been, I've got some notes in here. I'm going to go back and forth to them. I've been doing these videos for about 2 years now. And I've been on several major podcasts at this point. I did a live video today. I did a couple live videos this weekend. My wife spent all day cleaning the house. I've been down here working on this. Mark Gagnon's been sitting right here with his whole crew, and this entire place just filled up with cameras and all kinds of microphones and recording equipment and whatnot. And I'm shooting this right now on a Galaxy phone. Don't want to get too far off course and keep you disinterested, but the point being is that I could make a much greater effort to make things more theatric and stuff like that, but that wouldn't be honest. I could have a better studio like Sean Ryan just built, and I have updated my studio, but it's still within the realms of what's real. Not crafted, not polished. It's just, hey, this is Dave. This is what Dave likes. I've taken issue, you know what, I better stick with the script so I don't get too far off. You know, I made a thing, stop believing cartel grifters, demand sources, or stop spreading harm. The OSINT, which is open source intelligence, receipts why unsourced cartel claims are getting people hurt, right? I built a database, and I have built a database. It's right there. Now prove your sources or get out of the way. You know, I'm projecting this to be about 31 to 35 minutes, so somewhere in that area, about a half hour. If you make claims about cartel, fentanyl production, which has been done by Katarina Schultz on the Sean Ryan show just a year ago, organized crime that moves policy, money, or public fear, and you cannot show primary sources, you are not informing people, you're manufacturing consent for harm, right? I've spent the last year documenting exactly this pattern. Claims that collapse under scrutiny, numbers that never existed, narratives that kept getting repeated because they paid better than the truth. My channel's not monetized at all, so theirs are. When I come at you with hard proof that I am exactly who I said I am. Ed Calderon. I can get a skateboard, but I can't get Ed's last name. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, guys. You know, numbers that never existed, narratives that kept getting repeated because they paid better than the truth. This is not about personalities, it's about the mechanism. And I've done that in the failure analysis video I just uploaded, where I was talking about tracking things down to their final sources, how you track failure in the aerospace and defense industry through root cause and corrective action analysis, Ishikawa diagrams, and 5 whys, while you keep going down and to get to the root cause of the truth, whether it's in terms of methodology, manpower, machinery, measurement, failures, act of God, or material. There's 6 different arms on the Ishikawa diagram, and you go down each one of those claims and you get used to thinking the terms in concrete terms about being able to put your finger directly on who, what, where, when, why, how, and what does it mean, right? So I've kind of applied that to the cartel YouTube grifter industry in the United States, and guess what? I am not very popular now. This is not about personalities, it's about the mechanism. Unsourced assertions. Amplified fear equals policy pressure or donations, real world consequences, and people doing it have decided that demanding receipts makes me the problem. Fair? Not really. You know, I've found that with anything in life, if you want to get good at something, you keep doing it consistently. I put up something like 300 videos at this point. Well, not quite 300. I think the number's 248. I would have to double check, but it's approaching 300. I have 1,411 subscribers, and I've been on the comment section so often that I keep getting shut down just for asking proof of what people put out there. This morning I woke up, it's Sunday, I woke up and I started calling a couple born Mexicans who are bilingual, who speak Spanish, live in Mexico, and report on cartel news with their face open and have for years, and they're not imported Mexicans like Yon Grillo or Katarina Schultz, who is, I have my complete doubts about her even residing within the country. This is not about personalities, guys. This is about the absence of Mexican sources to present the truth to where we have a clear picture about what's really going on. I don't have a problem with any policy. I have a problem with people promoting things that get innocent people hurt, and the people that are backing these policies are doing so with the help of people that are not even attached to the world that they're reporting on in any meaningful way. Kind of problematic. Today I'm going to show you the pattern database method anyone can replicate, because I want anyone to do this, including against me. And the only standard that actually protects people: prove it or retract it. No more free passes. Not long ago, I did a video on the cartel-controlled rehabs that Ironclad did regarding Marco Rivera with Grupo Marti, which is a real-life group of tactical nurses, enfermeros tácticos in Spanish. And when I was able to identify the exact source that Katarina Schultz had interviewed, I interviewed him myself and recorded and uploaded the entire phone call so that you guys can listen to it. And he flat out refuted almost every sensationalized claim that Katarina Schultz, those of which being cartel members work in the rehab, the cartel operates the rehab, that people are being kidnapped and put in the rehab, that people are stuck in there when actually people are free to come and go, when actually people are, the rehab is staffed by ex-gang members, and there's no proof that these gang members work for any cartel any longer at all. No proof that any cartel at all operates the place. And in fact, this rehab has been receiving donations from the mayor of Tijuana, multiple mayors, including vehicles and up to 5 tanks of gasoline every week. All of which can be corroborated then with municipal presidents past and present. Kind of a problem when you identify your source, because then it gives you the ability, or gives your audience the ability, to double check your work, which is something they are loath to do. Establish the stakes without melodrama. Nothing about my channel is dramatic. You know, a lot of people think that it is about drama, and it is not. My channel is about getting to the truth of the matter, because if you care about people, if you're a decent human being in my book, you want to see that people do not get hurt. You want to make an honest living, and I don't have a problem with people making an honest living doing channels that entertain us all, enlighten us all. I think that those are very important things, and I've been very upfront or confrontational with Jeremy Carey about empower, enlighten, or entertain. I think that those are educate, whatever his 3 boxes are. I think that that's great, but I think that there should be a measure of truth behind everything that's done, and it shouldn't be sensationalized, even though oftentimes that's what your audience wants. You can't have it all. And be honest. It's not going to work that way. What is in dispute? Okay. People die from fentanyl. Families get destroyed by addiction. Communities on both sides of the border live with real cartel violence. That is not in dispute. I will never dispute that. I've seen it with my own face, my own eyes, too often, while at work, while in uniform. In fact, I've got it over there. I just moved it because I changed this around. What is in dispute is the flood of specific dramatic claims that keep circulating with zero primary evidence that cartels fully control rehab networks in Tijuana the way certain voices describe, that there are thousands of organized crime groups operating in Canada the way that it was presented, that major fentanyl production has simply relocated north of the Canadian border, and volumes claimed, and that every new viral story is somehow the missing piece the government is hiding. You know, I don't really want to stick with this entire script. And the reason why is because there are fantastic claims made by Katarina Schultz on the Sean Ryan interview a year ago, stating that there were 4,000 organized crime groups operating in Canada, and that major Mexican cartels have shifted fentanyl production north from Mexico to Canada. Except there's a couple problems with that. The Canadian National Intelligence Service, the group that is in charge of protecting the entire country, has documented exactly, not one more or one less, 668 organized crime groups operating in Canada, not 4,000. Katarina Schultz's number is almost 6 times higher than the actual number. Sensationalism. And also that the United States Border Patrol seizures and tonnage of fentanyl at the northern and southern border of the United States does not reflect Mrs. Schultz's claim of all the fentanyl trafficking being shipped north of the border, but in fact the exact opposite, that the production of fentanyl still is occurring in Mexico and is primarily coming across the southern border, not the northern border. And I don't want to come across as somebody that is trying to particularly demean one person or another person in particular. However, when you are put on major podcasts like Sean Ryan, who is the major podcast in the entire world, and he presents you as the premier expert on cartels when you have no skin in the game whatsoever other than an Instagram account, and chasing around local news sources to snap a couple pictures and act like you're in it, but you can't even be tasked with driving across the country because you might run into a cartel checkpoint. You're not authentic. And I would say that of anybody. I say that of Yohan Grillo, in fact, also, with the exception that Yohan Grillo, while he is not Mexican, he is British, that has been in Mexico for quite a while, does at least hit up government sources, which is something that no other, not a single American cartel YouTube podcaster has ever done at all. Australian Broadcasting Corporation can do it not once but twice. They can do it with Tijuana Municipal Police. They can do it with an infantry battalion that is in either, I forget, I think it's Guerrero or Morelia. The point being is that government fountains of information or sources, fuentes, excuse me, because I sometimes say it in my mind in Spanish. Government sources are available, but they're not ever utilized in American cartel podcasting. Okay. When those claims are wrong or wildly exaggerated, as they often are, they still move money, attention, and policy. They also make it harder for accurate reporting and real interdiction work to cut through the noise. That is the harm, not my tone, right? The consequence of treating unverified statements is settled fact. I have a background that includes direct documented work against cartels in Mexico for the Mexican government, of which I have proved ad infinitum. I've had my coworkers on my channel. I've provided my documentation, my check stubs, and everything else. Most of the loudest voices do not have an equivalent record. I am referring directly about Ed Calderon, Katerina Schultz, Luis Chaparro, Ana Gonzalez. There's so many. Gafe 423, Armapedia, and really just doing this video and putting together the script today, I realized that I have unfairly targeted solely the English-speaking audience, and I need to delve a lot further, not just into Gafe 423, but Armapedia and other sources, including American sources that pretend to have something going on. And it's not to say, when I say pretend, I want to be clear, I'm not referring to the entire body of their work. To say something is all bad is difficult to do unless you're speaking about very specific cases of evil and their victims. All bad. So when I'm referring to a YouTuber, and I'm loath to call them journalists, YouTuber's body of work, to say that I dislike every single thing they do would be inaccurate. When I do say that I like YouTubers, it does not mean that I believe that they're 100% truthful all the time. So there are people like Rivera, of whom I've spoken about on Julian Dories briefly. I like some of his work. Vincent Vargas, I like a lot of his work, and I probably like the guy on a personal level. Do I believe everything that they put out? Definitely not, especially when it is monetized, and the more views that they get means more money in their pocket, which is fine, but it ought to be labeled as theatrics or storytelling and not journalism. And it ought to be completely clear. Recently, Johnny Mitchell himself, who I also like his work, had to put a disclaimer regarding Ollie Gonzalez, a supposed cartel hitman who later on, in his own admission in England, because of having a job at the fire department, was found to be under investigation due to his claims on YouTube, and has retracted every single one of those claims. And when I go to Johnny Mitchell himself and ask Johnny Mitchell how he verified those claims, he told me it was so believable and everything, and that he would give me Ollie Gonzalez's cartel hitman contact number because I want to talk to him, and of which to date I have not received Ollie Gonzalez's contact information, because 1,000% I will go and buy that guy dinner, sit down across the table from him, and do an interview to verify everything about where he's been at in Mexico. Because if you can go on camera and admit to killing 70 or murdering 70 people, you ought to be able to sit down with someone that was in Mexican uniform right across the table for a free dinner and have a chit chat about it and verify the veracity of everything that he's claiming. Pretty simple. Same thing with Mark Lieta and the other people that he's had on his video. I would love to talk to him. Hector Bareilles. You have DEA agents who are on Sean Ryan also that will sit there and claim, or who you have DEA agents who themselves put out a whole bunch of videos talking about running and gunning in either Colombia or Mexico. And then you'll have, I think it was Peter Greer that was on Sean Ryan, sit there, who is Army Green Beret or Delta operator, whatever, sit there and flatly roundly reject these DEA agents' claims of running and gunning, which I myself have done. I did a video on that one too. It's somewhere on my channel. Because of the sovereignty of the host nation not allowing armed foreign actors to run around in their country willy-nilly and kill people that government itself is tasked with protecting. Does not work that way, guys. So there's so much stuff out there. Danny Jones. I chased down the agent in charge of the California Bureau of Investigation, and find out that the park ranger on there that's on Danny Jones had no evidence whatsoever that it was a cartel grow operation in Northern California and their shootout with the cartel, and everything is sensationalized. And I uploaded that phone call as well. And so when I go down, and every single time, Stefano Rittendell, you're not escaping my radar, sir. You're claiming of being in Mexico for 4 weeks. I'm looking into that claim right now and seeing the extent of your cartel expertise, which admittedly to your credit, you do admit that a lot of it is gleaned from Twitter. That does not sound like you have any boots on the ground experience in Mexico, which would give you any innate understanding other than any other person reading Twitter in Spanish. Así más claro, chico. And so I keep going down every single one of these things. And I want people to go after my claims too. When I claim something, I want you to hit me with the same amount of force that I would hit any other story with, because that is how you get to what is true, right? Let me continue. Specific case pattern, full integration. Let's work through the pattern without turning this into a personal feud, because it's not personal. One high-profile set of claims involved cartel control over certain rehab operations. I've already spoken about that. Dramatic language, high emotional narratives, and high emotional states. Katerina Schultz and others, everyone at Ironclad that put this out, including Jesse Carey and Bruno Vallejo, put this out. I emailed them. They did get back to me briefly, but then it dropped off. Amplified a narrative built around a primary source named Marco Rivera, who I interviewed. And I've just explained all this. When I have the opportunity to interview the same primary sources that these people put out, oftentimes you find out everything that they stated was a lie. Kidnapping in Mexico has a dedicated federal team that will go down and chase down whoever put it in there. And you can be looking at decades in prison if you kidnap somebody. What really goes on is families will involuntarily commit, and it is permitted per Mexican law, up to a certain amount of time, but that doesn't have the same racy zing as kidnapping, cartel controlled. And when I go and try to interview the people at Ironclad, which I just did again the other day, I called them up asking for the ability to interview Jeremy Carey and others, they refuse. Which is odd, being that Zacatecas is all over the news right now, and I have worked exactly all over Zacatecas for several years. And my phone call has not gotten any incoming phone calls from any of those people. Kind of weird, right? I know. So this isn't a minor discrepancy, all of these things that I'm pointing out. This is an entire foundation collapsing under its own weight. And under the direct contradiction of exactly the person that she was citing in her video. Not a minor discrepancy. Another high-profile example, appearances on major platforms asserting roughly 4,000 organized crime organizations active in Canada. Canadian intelligence refutes that. Seizures. American intelligence and law enforcement refutes that. The same pattern appears in smaller, more personal. I confronted J.D. DeLay, for example. This is going back, about the war zone in Portland. And when they find out that there's someone in Portland that can sit right here and report on this thing in real time, all of the J.D. DeLay and Valhalla VFT, Portland is a war zone episodes, stop with the screeching halt. Crazy. When I went on J.D. DeLay's live feed talking about wanting to do a live feed about it, I got cranky Frankie. You know, these guys will make all of these claims and they become major YouTubers. And you know, someday I might become a major YouTuber or whatever. I don't know where this will go. But what I do know is when you're going to sit there and make these crazy claims like Valhalla VFT, the same thing went on with them. I'm going to go off script for a little bit. I will sit there and be man enough to walk up to these people and be like, hey, Valhalla VFT, I just posted a video on it the other day. Super nice. I'm not some tiny guy. I have a voice. Full-grown man can walk up and be like, hey, Cartel Hitman, you want to have dinner? I've invited several of them on my own channel already. We'll still do it. Have invited Sean Ryan and Vincent Vargas for Rubber Bullet CQB. I will 1,000% show up. Matthew Cox, definitely want to be on your podcast. I asked Vincent Vargas how he validated Pierre Rossini working for the cartels when Pierre Rossini has been in Mexico exactly one time per his ex. I don't know if they were cellies, but they were locked up in federal penitentiary Coleman together. Matthew Cox and Pierre Rossini. Pierre Rossini also doesn't want to interview me. He gets out of prison March of 2023, and within a matter of months, he is experts on Juarez cartel. I can't get these guys to call me with a stick. So it's not just Katerina Schultz. There is a laundry list of people, including Ed Calderon, who, Eddie Dennis, for Ed Calderon, they have a thing together, watched my videos for a year and watched me shake $10,000 worth of cash trying to get an interview with him. Wouldn't do it until Camp Gagnon gave me enough public exposure to where they had to sit there and not confront me, but address the white elephant in the room, or the elephant in the room, actually in this case white, because if they didn't, it would damage their brand, so to speak, which is kind of what I'm talking about. So I did go on Ed, and you know what, to be fair, I like Ed and Eddie. I do. I like them quite a bit. However, I don't know why they would want me to sign a non-disclosure agreement unless they've fabricated or elaborated a lot of things or embellished a lot of things, which is leaning to what it is. I did verify that Ed was a member of Baja California State Police at one point in time, at least entered their academy. Was he out on patrol? Don't know. Can't verify it. Very little proof of any of Ed's workings, which is crazy because everybody that works down there, you can go on Twitter right now or to the Secretaría de Seguridad Pública, where I worked in Zacatecas, and look at tons and tons and tons of pictures. So the idea, and I was active at exactly the same time Ed was. So the idea that there aren't cell phones and being able to take pictures is just, that's a done deal. They absolutely had the ability to take pictures. Everything's hyper cinematic. And these people come back and become public personalities. However, they will not substantiate their claims. Ed Calderon states on Armapedia for Mexico Armado Forum, I had to make sure I got it right, that he was training tactical magazine exchanges with MARSOC Marine Travis Haley. When I emailed Travis Haley, right, to find out whether or not Ed Calderon was in fact training with him, Travis Haley would not answer that question at all. He would respond to my email if he thought it was a sell, but as soon as I asked if he had ever trained Ed Calderon, zip. Zero of Ed's contemporary Mexican people that have been trained by Navy SEALs or Naval Special Warfare have ever come out in public in Mexico, even though it is insanely difficult at times to earn a living in Mexico, to utilize their Naval Special Warfare training to their advantage to make a living in Mexico. They're non-existent. Not just as podcasters, but as security professionals that have documented training by some Master Chief Navy SEAL in the United States, of whom I interviewed one of the two owners of Skydive San Diego, which is a place where Navy SEALs train to jump out of airplanes in San Diego, that is owned by a previous Navy SEAL and also currently by Navy SEAL Jeff Bramstedt. And when I asked Jeff Bramstedt, of whom I also recorded and uploaded the entire phone call, they had never heard of training a group of Mexican nationals in the United States. And Jeff Bramstedt asked me to ask Ed Calderon what Master Chief signed off on his jump certificate. When I asked Scott Babb, Libre knife fighting founder, what Ed Calderon's second last name is for the certificate that Ed asked for to bring back to his work in Mexico, Scott Babb didn't know Ed Calderon's second last name, even though use of a second last name in Mexico by a Mexican citizen is obligatory. You have to use both of your last names, your father's last name and your mother's last name, which is problematic because that means that when you want to trace down or track down Ed Calderon to brass tacks to verify his story, you cannot. The only way I was able to validate Ed Calderon's story is with a CUIP, which is a Clave Único Identificación Policíaca, or police identification number that is unique to Ed Calderon or the police officer or anyone that has it, was through a number that Ed Calderon and Eddie Dennis had provided me. Is it really his? I don't know. I do know that someone under that name did enter Mexican police service in 2004. With the birth date that is similar to what Ed has published, which is open source intelligence. Anybody can validate this. let's just continue this. You know, watching the English speaking channel, I've been watching all this. You see the same, you know, I wanted to talk about that. You see the same dynamic play out with the Navy SEALs, with Don Shipley going after people that pretend to be Navy SEALs and stuff. And unfortunately, in the United States, there are no English speaking people that have proven what they've done for the Mexican government, because it just doesn't happen. That this area to be exploited even exists. And then along comes your buddy Dave, and just because my life has been so strange, I did wind up in a Mexican uniform. One sec. I wanted to show this to you because it's right there. And not just that one, because maybe I bought it off of eBay. But this one too. And so that's kind of like when I'm talking about receipts, you know. And I've got all my documents upstairs that I've shown you guys repeatedly, paycheck stubs and etc. Because a lot of people, when I came out, and I encouraged them to call me out and claim that I'm lying and stuff like that. Thank you for doing that, because it compels me to give you evidence so you can see that I am not, and that I'm genuine, and that not everyone on YouTube is lying about everything. Don Shipley calls these people out right and left. There are Navy SEALs themselves that are not fake Navy SEALs, that have been caught to be lying right and left on TV. DEA agents lying about running and gunning and taking down all kinds of different people, when you have other Homeland Security agents begging for their life when they're about to be executed right outside of San Luis Potosi. Places I myself have patrolled in uniform for a Mexican government agency. I'm not comparing resumes for status. I'm pointing out the functional difference. When someone has done actual work, whether that is Shipley's record with SEAL credentials or documented operational work against cartels, certain things simply do not add up. You'll watch these people put on balaclavas like it's some type of theatrical thing. Gafe 423 is a great example of this, and El Condor, and every single one of the people that he has on there. Anybody that's been on Gafe 423's channel, I would love to interview you. Unfortunately, I cannot offer you money, because that would provide an ulterior motive, and you would have to do so out of your own free will and have to contact me directly, because I've been trying to contact you guys. Unfortunately, because you guys keep your identity concealed, which is crazy, because if a cartel really wanted to say something, they wouldn't have to conceal their identity. Everybody involved already knows everybody involved anyways, either through people that have been busted in Mexico and informed on their co-workers, or people that want to be known, or people that are just known because there are agreements or acuerdos between the government and known operators. So it's not like people in Mexico have to hide. Additionally, people that do report on things that the cartel does not want known have a way of winding up dead very quickly. In fact, much to my chagrin, when Katerina Schultz is sitting there on Sean Ryan's show, she's talking about Mexico has some of the most violent circumstances and working conditions for any journalist anywhere in the world, and that nobody unalives more journalists than Mexico does, and a lot of them being female. However, somehow Katerina Schultz has gotten herself a pass because she just refuses to say no or ask a different way, as though that wouldn't have occurred to any one of the several tens of thousands of bilingual journalists in Mexico. Probably not, guys. You know, I talked about Tucker Carlson and Sean Ryan already. You know, this is a recurring loop. That people make dramatic claims without primary documents, court records, seizure breakdowns, or named official assessments, or in the rehab case with a named source whose actual statements did not match the broadcast version. Rapid amplification because it fits an existing narrative or generates engagement. Right? When primary data or the primary source themselves is examined and the claim fails, or when repeated good faith requests for an interview are simply ignored, as mine have been with Ironclad and many other people going on several years now at this point, if I'm going to include Sean Ryan and Joe Rogan. I've gone back years trying to get on these guys. Not even to grow my own audience and not even on air. Just a chance to interview them off camera and they won't do it. Nothing. Or their production managers on top of that. You know, when repeated good faith requests for an interview are simply ignored, or when a friendly interaction turns hostile the moment proof is requested, the amplifiers treat the demand for sources as an attack. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm asking people to provide proof of their sensational claims. The original claim continues circulating, often monetized. I've been compiling an open source intelligence log of these claims over the past year. What was asserted, what primary material, if any, was offered, and what subsequent official data, court records, or direct re-interviews of the cited sources showed, in which items were quietly walked back or simply abandoned. A good example of this is Tommy G's cartel connection phone number that he posted in one of his videos. And I call it up. I've got a video of it. And the original video that I put up had several thousand views immediately, and people flooding the comments because the phone number was disconnected. But my broader point is that when you include a phone number in a video about cartel people, as though it's some type of cartel contact, it is completely probable that the phone number would no longer be included or connected. And when I called it up, indeed it was not. But the bigger problem is when I contact Tommy G about, at the end of that video, he wants anyone having anything to do with Cartel de Jalisco de Nueva Generación to get in touch with him, and I do. And he doesn't want to talk to me because I worked right there, exactly where the people that he wants to talk about worked. And to be fair, I am certain that governments look at me and investigate me to figure out, to make sure that I have kept my feet on the right side of the line or not. And this guy doesn't even want to talk, even though I'm directly where he wants to talk about. Tommy G. And then not only that, I have Julian Dory blowing up my phone number when Tommy G gets back to Julian. They'll talk amongst themselves, but they won't talk to me. And then Julian Dory gets back to me, asking me what the hell I told Tommy G. And Tommy G accusing me. There is a lot of drama here, but it's not mine. I'm asking for the opportunity to interview the same people these guys say that they want to interview, and they don't want to interview someone that's actually worked there. Which is kind of, I'm going to wrap this video up. The incentive problem and why ostracism happens. Why the hostility? Because sustained scrutiny threatens the revenue model. That's what I represent to these people. Ed Calderon, Tommy G, Julian Dory, you two at this point, Katarina Schultz, Joe Rogan, Lex Fridman, Sean Ryan, John Kiriakou, to his credit, or Jack, is it Jack Kiriakou? At least emailed me back. But Andrew Bustamante, all of these different people that I've gone down just wanting to figure out or corroborate their sources, to where we can be like, yes, this is not a CIA operation, and where they're lying to everybody on YouTube to drum up boots on the ground in Mexico and yet another war and another invasion that none of us want to pay for or need. And if I say none of us, I'm talking about a substantial group of people, not a couple 100,000, a couple million, a couple 100 million could be, who knows. And then more than that if we're counting the other side of the border. So I'm asking these questions in good faith, guys. Certain channels and personalities have built audience and income streams on continuous escalation, bigger numbers, more sensational control narratives, more they're coming for your community next framing. Accurate source reporting is slower, less emotionally charged, which is why it's taken me a year to put this database together. And often less lucrative. I have only spent money putting this channel to you now in excess of $10,000. And not the $10,000 I was offering Ed, an extra 10 grand on top of that. You know, when someone with a documented background of working against the cartel start requiring the same evidentiary standard that any serious investigator, journalist, or analyst would demand, and then actually goes and re-interviews the primary sources, confronts specific public claims with requests for proof, and further extends repeated interview invitations. To the claim makers themselves, the economic threat is obvious. That's what I am. That is why I am not all over. You know, when I first started doing my videos, I had several hundreds of views. It wasn't blown up. But now, since I've really been demanding proof, a lot of things have gone on to diminish my audience. Julian Dory not immediately posting my contact information in the videos he's done. Johnny Mitchell, for that matter. Ed Calderon, for that matter. None of these people, at the time that the video initially airs, will put it, my contact data, as they do with so many other channels, because I do require receipts. And if I require receipts, pretty soon people are going to start looking at these other people and wonder why they haven't. So here's what I'm stuck with, guys. I have to continue doing these videos right here. My little Bigfoot coffee mug. My little wooden chair. My Jack Daniel barrel from Lynchburg, Tennessee. Being genuine to you, and sooner or later, my channel will take off, or I'll have government people or cartel people come after me and try to silence me in one way or another. That's what will happen. If what I'm saying is true, and I do enough damage to false narratives that they want put out, or if I report on something the other side does not want put out. Being that that's true, the idea that other outsiders can just walk in, these same outsiders that admit to not being willing to drive across the same place they pretend to report on, because they might actually meet someone that they pretend to report on. It's crazy, you know, where that all goes. Major podcasts have platformed me and then gone quiet when the follow-up questions about sources arrive. It's not conspiracy, it's risk management. We talked about that. Demanding primary material from popular guests or showing that the primary source does not actually support the claim is inconvenient. So the person asking becomes a difficult one, and the unsourced or overstated narrative continues. And you're going to see this. I recently signed up for Julian Dory's members only thing to be able to get a lead look at what he's going to come out and sit there and report on with Katerina Schultz, who's been over in Ukraine talking about Mexican nationals over learning cartel tactics. We have come up with one Colombian, one that was reported on. I did a video on it the other day. If you want to go look at it, go ahead. To where they put out a story a year ago but couldn't come up with any documentation from Ukrainian intelligence sources or any public officials, where I've come up with several documents and sources of Americans being charged with the same thing with several Ukrainians in India, but Katerina Schultz and those guys aren't over reporting on that. And that actually is documented. You can look it up right now. However, they're going to claim that there are several Mexicans in Ukraine using drones in the United States, but they won't do any reporting on what is it? It's Matthew something or other, has a nonprofit or a non-governmental organization in Washington, D.C., and is in an Indian prison right now with 6 Ukrainians for doing drone stuff. I've done videos on that. Go look it up. I'm sure you'll find it interesting. However, they will bring these sensational claims that Mexican operators with no proof are going to Ukraine learning drone tactics over there, as though drone tactics have not been going on in Mexico for several years in terms of either delivering drugs or already having government level training in Mexico and then having these people go to work for the cartel. Happens. So, the only sustainable strategy, the force going forward, the forward path that actually reduces harm instead of just generating more content drama. First, stop treating personality as the story. Katerina Schultz and her face and her belly button piercing and her tight-fitting clothes and a lot of her things might be pleasurable to look at for a lot of people, and you see it in the comments, it indeed is. Does not give her any credibility whatsoever. Same goes for Vincent Vargas. The guy is a stud in terms of being an Army Ranger. I like Vincent. doesn't mean that he knows anything about what goes on in Mexico. And that goes for the entire Special Forces operation community. Green Beret Chronicles, Bahala VFT, Vincent Vargas, anyone at Ironclad, Andy Stump, another person I've emailed and hasn't gotten back to me, Sean Ryan, the entire laundry list of people at this point, Mike Ritland, Taylor Kavanaugh, etc., etc., etc. I've gone down the whole thing. None of these people, all of these people have done cartel-related podcasts, and none of them have ever actually worked in Mexico in any sense, not even private security for a family as far as I'm aware of. However, they speak to it as though they have some type of operational experience in Mexico, and it's completely night and day different when your entire family and self and you live amongst the same enemy that you're fighting. It is not the same as deploying with an entire naval attachment of ships at your spine waiting to pick you up and extract you as soon as your mission is done. Not the same thing at all. So, there's that. Stop treating personality as a story. The story is the claim and the evidence or lack of it every time a dramatic cartel or fentanyl assertion is made in public. The response from serious observers should be the same 3 questions delivered calmly and repeatedly. With me? What is the primary source document, data set, official assessment, or individual? Name it. What is it? Can you? Because if you can't, you don't have a story. Can the source be independently examined or re-interviewed? Pretty simple. If the claim is later contradicted by seizure data, court records, multi-agency reporting, as is the case when I went to the California Bureau of Investigations and found out that there was no evidence substantiating cartel grows in Northern California per the game warden that was accompanying another investigation that got in a sensational shootout with cartel instead of just some Northern California pot growers that happen to be Latino. Happens. There's a lot of Latinos in California. No evidence. Could not cite it. Asked him directly, the guy in charge. I posted a video of that too. If the claim is later contradicted by seizure data, court records, multi-agency reporting, or the primary source's own account, which is what I did in both of these cases I just got done talking about, cartel rehab, or the Danny Jones, what is it, Dan Webb, Jake Webb, whatever, it escapes me because there's so many of them now at this point that it's hard to keep track of all of them. However, the California game warden that went on the shootout with California Bureau of Investigations to take down pot grows in Northern California, I believe it was with the ATF or whatever. You go and interview these guys and they come up with blanks, man. Hector Bareilles, another one. I would love to interview you, sir. You've been on Vincent Vargas. You won't touch me with a stick, even though I've worn a uniform in Mexico against the same guys you claimed to have fought for your entire career. Won't return an email or a phone call. You know, that's another thing. Michael Francisi, his thing. Lives in California, has a publicly available number, except the number that is listed on his company's 1 digit short of being able to actually complete the phone call. So you can't even get in touch with these guys through their own wine business or whatever. It's what's on Google right now. So you go down on the rabbit hole with all these things, and every single time you find something that's inaccurate or hides or shields who these people really are. Second, building, okay, so will you update or retract the same platforms with the same value? About that, when I've hit up Ironclad about retracting the inaccuracies on their cartel-controlled rehab, they won't do it. Not just them. I should hit up Danny Jones. I haven't done that. But there's no retractions ever, even though they're found to be wrong. Sean Ryan himself has talked about a lot of the people on the Tucker Carlson thing where everything's a lie, about having found that many of his own guests are lying. And I've been screaming this at the top of my lungs for the last year or so. And now it'll become a thing because Tucker Carlson and Sean Ryan said it. But really at that point you have to ask what their narrative is, why they would now, with all the problems in the world going on, be talking about everything on YouTube and in which is basically media for a lot of the internet in the United States these days, everything being a lie, on their own platforms. Second, build and publish the comparison logs in public, which is what I'm doing. not as a gotcha content, but as a living reference, claim the original statement with the date and the platform, any source offered, subsequent primary data or re-interview results, record of outreach attempts to the claim maker themselves, which is why when I get a phone call with Ironclad requesting an interview, I have to record it and then stick it in the video so there is a public record that they have denied reaching out and doing an interview to clean up any of the mess that they create. Etc., etc., etc. Third, refuse to participate in platforms or panels that will not enforce basic sourcing norms, which these people don't want, because all of a sudden things are much less entertaining because you can't just make any exaggerated claim or outright lie that you want because someone's going to call you on your crap. Separate legitimate concern from manufacturer specificity. Cartels are real. Fentanyl is killing people. Precursor chemicals move. Corruption exists. Those facts do not require invented numbers, collapsed narratives, exaggerated control claims, war zone absolutism, or unverified special operations, assassination stories to remain urgent. You know, the thing with Luis Chaparro talking about outing CIA operative names and not backing it up with any concrete claim is wild, right? Dude is an immigrant to the United States, makes these sensational claims, but isn't worried about losing his U.S. citizenship. The person, and I should pause this because I want to make sure I got it right, but Ed Calderon himself has interviewed a woman from Los Angeles that runs a news site, but come to find out through Eddie Dennis that her husband works at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City or thereabouts, and I forget what the news agency name is. However, she's coming across as some type of legitimate news source. You know what? Hold up. Let me pause this. I'm going to get it for you. There it is. Demolaire. I've got it right there. Don't know if that zoomed in or not. But even on Ed's podcast, he'll have Demolaire, and the lady that runs all of that or works for it, her husband works for the United States Embassy in Mexico City, per Eddie Dennis. Have it in one of my texts or on a phone call, but that's where I got that from specifically. And so it's crazy to me that Americans would have to go to some chick that lives in L.A., grew up in L.A., and is going to bring you cartel news because her husband works at the American Embassy in Mexico City, like they would have any insight. And they would have insight from an American side of things, but they wouldn't have any actual Mexican operational insight as far as what goes on the ground, out on patrol while you're at work in Mexico. Doesn't happen. And then even other guests Eddie Calderon has had on. Billy Trident, the guy with the mask. Everything is always theatrics, man. And I don't want to, Ed makes a great product too as far as like keeping it entertaining. I bought a film projector because of Ed. I like his work. I think the dude's cool. I would love to hang out and have carne asada with him. They won't do it. They don't want to talk to me. Fifth, apply the standard evenly. If a government agency or a media outlet or an independent researcher makes an overstated claim, it gets the same treatment, including me. The goal is not to protect any tribe. The goal is to raise the cost of unsupported assertions that influence policy and public behavior. And then finally, addressing the "you're helping the cartel" smear. I'm not helping it. I'm gonna get done with this right now. I'm not helping any cartel. In fact, I am out of all of the YouTube podcasters on TV, with the only exception of Ed Calderon, and the only one proven to have actually fought these guys on the ground in Mexico where they live at home. So I'm not a cartel cheerleader at all, and neither are my brothers and neither are my sisters, many of whom have already been murdered and even had their heads cut off. Not to get too graphic, but that's really what it is. And then to have these people that are outsiders and tourists come in and try to, like birds, like vultures coming in for carrion, trying to strip away everything that's left for their own benefit. And I'm going to end this video on this because my wife and I were talking about it today. the reason why this isn't personal and the reason why this isn't dramatic is because these people come in and they probably make a pretty good living with their YouTube channels, which is great for you. But I want you to know that you're doing so at the expense of a little child, someone's life, someone somewhere, someone's husband, someone's wife that's going to be murdered or sold into sex trafficking or something like that, helping grandize things or not fight this thing accurately because you want to sit there and sensationalize news sources that are fabricated, won't prove your source, or put stuff out that influences policies that are ineffective because everything's based on a lie and people don't have access to actual data and hard news stories. You're responsible for that. If you can live with yourself for that, you go right ahead, but it's not something I could do. And every single time I try to get to the bottom of some story, my emails, my phone calls, my letters, my arrivals in person are all met with silence. So, that's enough out of me for the day. Hope you guys have a great day. Hope you dig the set. Cheers, man.